What's going on, family? Welcome back to another episode of Financial Freedom Fast Lane. And remember, the quicker you get to your dream life, the longer you get to live it. And I'm your host, George Ashenpong. And today we're going to talk about something that's a little less attractive, but something that's very necessary when it comes to building wealth and making sure that your financial plan is bulletproof. All right, so let's get into it. All right, so the first point is making sure that you have the right types and amounts of insurances, right? Whether this is life insurance, disability insurance, health insurance, property and casualty insurance, right? Like, people always talk about making money. People always talk about investing and maximizing money. But like, if you don't have an economic moat, if you're not protecting what you're building, then none of this stuff could even matter, right? I talked a little bit about moat on one of the other episodes, but like, make sure that you understand how your insurances work, right? The last thing that you want is to have an accident or to have a situation, and on the back end, you're trying to figure out if you have the right type and the right amount of life insurance, or if you have the right type and amount of disability insurance. And with life insurance, you can't figure it out on the back end because you're not here, right? And the last thing you want your family to worry about, I probably shouldn't have laughed in relation to life insurance and say y'all not gonna be here, but like you have to make sure that it's correct, because you don't want your family, right, to now be mourning the loss of you, but also navigating and mourning the loss and realizing that they don't have enough financial resources to take care of all the things that they need to take care of if you're no longer here, right? So these are things that at least once a year you want to be reviewing, evaluating, and updating to make sure that they make sense. Disability insurance is another big one, right? Because when you think about it, there is insurance on a lot of things. There's insurance on this iPhone that I have, but what is the insurance on your ability to earn income, right? That is disability insurance. Making sure that if you get hurt or if you get sick, there's something in place that can replace some or most of your income. These are things that most people aren't thinking about, because here's a funny stat for you, right? Or interesting stat, I should say. You're actually 3 times more likely to become temporarily disabled in your working years than you are to die prematurely. What does that mean? You are probably going to live a long, healthy, fruitful life. There'll be some hiccups along the way, but in that journey, in that process, there could be a time where you're hurt or you're sick and you can't work, right, for a period of time, maybe not indefinitely, but for a period of time. And if you don't understand how your disability insurance works, right, if you're a working professional, like, is my employer covering all or some, right? Is it a taxable benefit? Is it tax-free? Because if it's taxable and they're only covering 50%, then that means I don't not only go from receiving 100% of my pay to 50% of my pay, then of that 50%, that is also going to be taxed. Right? And these are things that you want to have awareness of. I hope, right? And God forbid that you ever have to use any of these benefits, but it's one of those things where it's better to have it and not need it than to need it and not have it. So make sure that you truly evaluate and understand all the different insurances that you need to have to make sure that your financial plan is bulletproof. All right, so you might have heard this quote before where people say, own nothing and control everything. And I think there's a happy medium. I don't think that like you need to go overboard and like have your assets owned by a trust that's submerged underneath the water in the Cayman Islands, right? I don't think you have to go that far, but it is important to make sure that you have the right structure, right? Do I have an estate plan? Are my assets structured for not only asset protection, right, but for also tax mitigation, right? Because when you do that, that is going to put you in a very good position to make sure that not only are you building more wealth, but you're also protecting the wealth that you are building, right? So when is the last time that you've evaluated your estate plan? Do you have an estate plan? Do you have a trust? Do you have a will? Do you need one or the other? Do you need both? These are questions that you want to ask and make sure that you've addressed it. And for the people that are in our program in the Melanin Millionaires Club, these are things that we actually help them navigate and actually help them solve through. If you're not in our program or not in our community, I strongly encourage you to, 1, consider joining, or 2, make sure that you do your own due diligence on figuring out if I am doing the right things when it comes to asset protection and tax mitigation, right? Because again, you don't want to go through this entire process, entire journey of building wealth and doing all the right things only to find out that you're not structured the right way. All right, so the last thing on this list is you have to have a comprehensive review of your entire risk management strategy, right? So we talked a little bit about insurances and things of that nature, but like you got to think of every contingency, right? You got to think of, all right, what happens if I get laid off? So we talked a little bit about having disability insurance if you get hurt or sick, but what happens if you get laid off and you're just no longer making the money that you need to make? Do you have a fully funded emergency fund that's going to be able to help you take care of expenses in that scenario, right? Do I have the right intellectual property rights, right? Am I securing stuff through trademarks and copyrights so that I'm not out here building a brand that I don't own? My trademark attorney always talks about this. She's like, people are like, would you build a house on land you don't own? And essentially, when you build a brand and you don't own your trademarks, right, that is essentially what you're doing. Now, you might think, oh, I'm a small business owner now and nobody cares. Nobody cares, and it's not a problem until it is. And the longer you wait and the longer you delay, the more exposure and the more risk and the more critical it becomes after you've built all this brand equity, only to find out that you might not even own it, right? So do a comprehensive review of everything, like literally poke holes in your own ship, right? So that way you can identify the vulnerabilities. To take it a step further, I always like to tell my entrepreneur clients about something I call a single point of failure. And what a single point of failure is what is one thing that if that happened, it would cause a severe disruption to my operation. For example, let's say that 60% of your revenue comes from this really big client. Well, that's a single point of failure, because if they stop working with you, you just lost 60% of your revenue overnight, right? What happens if you get sued, right? Let's say you own real estate and you own short-term rentals, and somebody slips and falls on one of your properties, right? What happens? Do you have the right protection mechanisms in place to mitigate that if it happens, right? So literally just think about all the things that make up your financial plan and ask myself, have I put the right risk mitigation strategy in place? Because if not, I'm not truly making my financial plan bulletproof, right? It's not just about making the money. It's not about just managing it. It's not just about maximizing it, right? You also have to have that moat, which I talked about on a previous episode, right? So make sure you guys are doing a comprehensive review of your the holes in your financial ship. Make sure you're proactively plugging those holes, figuring out what that looks like so that you can become financially bulletproof. Thanks so much for tuning into this episode. If you like this video, make sure that you subscribe, leave a comment. Let me know the other types of content that you guys want to see from us on this particular segment. And of course, if you haven't watched our weekly podcast, make sure you go back and watch that. Just like this airs every Friday, that airs every single Wednesday. And until next time, guys, remember, freedom is for sale if you're willing to pay the price.